Hi, Michael.
Hi, Stacy.
Um, Welcome to our first recording in our series.
Thank
What are
you.
we calling it?
I survived cancer. Now what?
Now what?
Mhm.
Okay. Do you want to say a little bit about why you came up with this idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll get it a little bit in some of the questions too, but my experience being a cancer survivor was that there was a good amount of support during the time when I was had cancer and was like going through surgeries and things. Um, and I felt like the support quickly sort of dried up after I was considered okay. Um, and I wanted to create a forum to just talk about what longer term cancer survivors experience in terms of support and the need for support, and just open that conversation. I think it probably varies quite greatly. And I also wanted to get that out there to, hear the different experiences people have as longer term survivors.
Awesome. So, before we jump into the questions, should we introduce ourselves? Is there anything else you want folks to know about you than you are Michael Wise, he, him, cancer survivor?
Um, I think that's maybe enough for now. I don't know. Do you have anything you
Okay.
want to share?
No, my name's here, and I'm in same boat as you. So let's just jump in.
Okay.
Um, so why don't we start by can you share a little bit about the type of cancer you had and kind of how far along it was when you found out?
Sure. I had testicular cancer. I believe it was stage 1B, if I'm recalling correctly. It was they said it was caught fairly early, which surprised me because I had actually found a lump and did nothing about it for quite a while. I kind of
Mm.
froze, and just sort of went into, I think, a bit of denial, and literally waited a couple of months before I went to the doctor to get it checked out. So I was lucky and sort of surprised that it was still fairly early stage.
Yeah. And how long ago was it?
I was as we were coming to this call, I was like trying to figure that out. I had to go back and look in my Instagram, and apparently, I think I was diagnosed in October of 2015.
Wow,
Um,
you're coming on 10 years.
yeah, which kind of surprised me. I think I've been technically cancer free. My cancerversary, from what my oncologist told me, was January 22nd of 2016, which was when I had my last kind of big surgery and there was no more cancer found. So technically, it's like, it was like 8 years in January. But yeah,
Wow.
reflecting back and seeing those dates, I was like, wow, it's been a long time.
Yeah. So speaking of your last surgery, how does one, what kind of treatments did you go through for stage 1B testicular cancer 8 years ago?
Yeah, so I actually started out with one oncologist, and the recommendation, the first surgery that always happens for people with testicular cancer is called an orchiectomy. I hope I'm saying that right. But they actually have to remove the testicle because there's no other way to biopsy. Um, and so that's the first surgery. It's an outpatient, you have to go under, obviously, but it's an outpatient in 1 day surgery situation. They remove the testicle, do biopsy, and then come back with the results. So that was the first surgery I had, and then the oncologist recommendation, which is sort of the standard recommendation for that stage and for testicular cancer, was to go through a couple of rounds of chemo. And I was set up to do that, but I have a sister-in-law that's a nurse at Sloan Kettering, and another sister-in-law that's a nurse elsewhere, and they both recommend that I get a second opinion just to see if it was consistently, the recommendation. And my sister-in-law at Sloan Kettering worked with a testicular cancer expert, so I went and met with him, and
That's fortuitous.
yeah, it was pretty fortuitous. And he was pretty adamant that chemo was not the way to go. Um, at the time I was in my early 40s, and he said that there was could be a lot of potential negative impacts of chemo for a younger person, especially if it's not deemed necessary. Um, and so he recommended either doing nothing, just going into surveillance and having regular checkups to see if anything came back, or to do a pretty aggressive surgery called a retroperitoneal lymph node dissection. Um, and that was a both diagnostic and sort of curative option. And after a lot of weighing things, I opted to go with that surgery. Um, I didn't feel comfortable just kind of waiting to, see if anything came back. That felt kind of stressful to me. And even though the surgery was pretty terrifying, it felt like it would be more informative and conclusive. And that
Mm.
that surgery involves opening you up, removing kind of all your innards, moving them away, and then they removed about 50 plus lymph nodes from the back of my abdomen.
Mm.
Um, they dissect them to make sure that there's no cancer in any of them. And it also, in removing those, it's preventative because that is most likely where it would spread to.
Yeah.
Um, that was the last surgery. Luckily, after I did that surgery, they didn't find any more cancer, and I didn't have to have any more chemo or treatment after that.
Yeah. So as an aside, your bald head has nothing to do with chemo. My pet peeve on TV shows is they show men who've gone through chemo and they have full eyebrows and full beards. And I'm like, it doesn't work that way.
No, this is just my bald head. That's all it
I
is.
love it. I love it. So that sounds like a pretty intense surgery and a pretty intense set of decisions. What did you do to support yourself during this journey? Were there self-care practices or integrative treatment practices that supported you while navigating this?
Yeah. I didn't really access a support group or therapy or anything like that. In retrospect, maybe I should have. Um, it wasn't really offered to me. I was kind of surprised by that. Sloan Kettering was amazing, like honestly amazing in terms of care. But I was never really presented with like, you should talk to the social worker or there's a group or anything like that. And so it honestly didn't really cross my mind too much, which surprised me. Um, I work with a coach regularly as, I'm a coach professionally. And so I did, work with my coach a lot around what I was going through and what I was navigating. Um, I have a friend that's a Reiki practitioner, and I did a bunch of Reiki. I do a lot of meditation on my own, and I reached out to several friends that were also cancer survivors and kind of talked with them about their experience and meditations and things that they did that sort of helped them kind of stay grounded. So it was sort of a combo of using my coach, doing some meditation, doing some Reiki, and talking to other friends that were survivors.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, as a now long-term survivor, what, if anything, are you still struggling with, or what do you still need?
Yeah, I thankfully don't have a ton of big struggles these days. I think the biggest thing is, and I know you can relate because we've talked about this. I think the biggest thing is sort of the long standing ripples of kind of post traumatic, stress experience of this whole thing. Um, I'm sometimes surprised by when it pops up, like certain physical sensations in my body will trigger it coming back pretty quickly. Even all these years later, like I'll feel something in my body, and the first thought will be, "Oh my God, I hope it's not cancer, some sort of cancer coming back." Um, that seems to be sort of the biggest thing. You know, I had a situation where I fainted and fell and hit my head, and my doctor sent me for an MRI, and it had absolutely nothing to do with cancer, ultimately. But the request for the MRI got rejected, and the imaging place reached out to me and said, sorry, it got rejected. We have to reschedule. And the reason that the doctor put the request for the scan was because she thinks that your cancer has returned and spread to your brain. And this was like the first I heard that from anybody, like on a call with a, admin person at an MRI place. And it sent me spiraling. I was like, why didn't anybody tell me that? And I had to sort of calm myself down and realize that that wasn't actually the reason. I'm sure my doctor probably just put that to get the most expedited, treatment or make it the most compelling case. And shockingly, even them thinking that cancer had returning into my brain wasn't enough to get an MRI, which is crazy in and of itself. But that's a thing, 8 years later that I'm sitting in this conversation and getting this like extreme anxiety response and post-traumatic response out of the blue that I hadn't anticipated. So it's moments like that are kind of the biggest things that still sit with me.
Yeah.
And the unexpected times that these things kind of pop up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Um, that's kind of, I think, the most significant right now.
So, as a long-term survivor, as you think of that situation or other situations, what would you have liked? What support services would you have liked to seen created or offered to you to help you through that type of situation?
Yeah, I think it would be nice to have support groups or coaching or even just forums to connect with other long-term survivors. There are a few out there. I've done a lot of searching um, after I was in better shape. One of the things I did is I worked for 4 years on a national cancer helpline as a resource specialist. And part of my job was trying to help people locate resources like that. And there were almost none, honestly,
Mm,
for long-term survivors. Some cancers have more resources than others. You know that pretty well. Like some are pretty popular, and get a lot of attention and get a lot of resources, and others don't get so much. But for long-term survivors, sort of across the board, there just wasn't a ton. So I think just even having community, I don't feel like I need ongoing support necessarily, but like on the days where something crazy like that pops up, or I'm not feeling like something triggers me, it'd be nice to have a place to be able to go and connect with people and just say, oh, this just happened. I just need to talk it through, get a little
yeah,
support, process it, and put it behind me until another thing pops up. I don't
yeah,
feel like I need to be in a weekly group or a monthly group, but just a place I could go if I needed to.
yeah. What about like friends and family? Like long-term survivorship can be different from that first when you're in the thick of it or that first
Mm-hmm.
year or so out of it. As a long-term cancer survivor, what would you want your friends and family to know, or how would you hope they show up, or what advice would you give to friends and family of a long-term survivor?
I think it's around some of the stuff I was just saying, to know that even though the imminent threat is so far away at this point, um, that it's still there's like a lived experience, a sense memory in my body. There are times I get triggered unexpectedly. I still have to go for scans every year, and much to my surprise, I still have a lot of anxiety, scanxiety, as they call it.
Anxiety.
Yeah. I find myself, the first year I had to go for scans every month. And then for the next couple of years, it was every 3 months. And that brought comfort and stress. It was like knowing I was getting tested regularly gave me a lot of relief to know they were finding something if it was there. But then also having to be at Sloan Kettering every month, it was like, oh, I'm like really a cancer patient. I'm here all the time.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
full-time
and
job.
seriously. And every time you get a little distance from it, you're back there and you're like, okay, I can't really move away from this. Now that the scans are every year, you can get some distance from it. But then when the scans get close, the mind starts to go, what if there's been something in my body for 11 months now and I could have been addressed and I didn't do anything because I'm waiting a year? So that anxiety pops up every time I'm going for a scan, and I just feel in my body all the tension, all the fear that I felt at the very beginning. Um, and it's like the further away you get, the more relief there is. But then it almost feels like the fear of finding something gets bigger too. I don't know. It's
Mhm.
a weird combo. So just my friends and family knowing that that's a reality that I'm dealing with, and when I say I'm going to get scans, and they're like, okay, that it's bigger than it sounds. Um, I think most people moved on from it fairly quickly, as you would expect people to do. They're not you and they're not dealing with it on a daily basis. I did experience sort of in the immediate, not really family, but a couple of like less close friends seeming to get a little frustrated with me still talking about cancer after I was like better. Um, and that was a little disappointing because especially in the immediate, it was pretty present for me all the time. And even now, there are times where it still pops up in a significant way. Um, but yeah, just knowing that even though I'm far away from it, that it's still quite present at times in my life. The reality of it and the fear of recurrence still can loom pretty heavily in moments. Thankfully, not all the time, but sometimes.
I do think for friends and family, it's a really hard balance to strike because when you're
Hmm.
far out from it, you're like, I don't want to talk about it. Or you're like,
Hmm.
I do want to talk about it. And I feel like all I do is talk about it. Then if they ask you about it, you're like, why are you bringing this up? But then if they don't ask you about it, you're like,
Yeah.
why aren't you asking me about it? It's kind of a tough situation for friends and family to be in, and obviously a tough situation for us. I mean, how do you navigate that Goldilocks moment?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I think what you're saying is really accurate. And it actually has made me think about, beyond cancer, friends that have dealt with other health issues or other challenges in their lives. Like, when do I stop checking in
Hmm.
or caring or investing
Hmm.
or, thinking about that? I do think it is a bit of a Goldilocks situation because you don't want to pester somebody or keep bringing it up if they don't want to talk about
Yeah,
the cancer anymore. Um, but I think the people in my life that have done the best job are the people that periodically will just ask, "How's your health these days?" Or,
yeah,
you know, anything going on that you're concerned
yeah,
about, in a kind of light way, but just like saying that I
yeah,
remember, I
yeah,
still think about and know that you went through that and know it was
yeah,
significant. Give me an invitation to talk about it if I want to, but not press too hard.
yeah,
Um, I think those are kind of the most effective. I still have a handful of friends and family that ask a couple of times a year, just checking in.
yeah,
Did you have scans recently? Any new
yeah,
information? Um, and obviously, if I'm having a freak out about something, like knowing that there's a handful of people in my life that I can reach out to and they'll be willing to sit with me and listen.
yeah. Yeah, I think one thing I agree with you 100%. I think that last point is so important. The muscle that has been exercised as a long-term survivor for me is like knowing how to ask for what I need, and that goes well beyond cancer. And it's probably a really good life skill to have. But
Yeah,
like knowing who those people are and knowing you can ask for them, it's such a important um, role that people can play in your lives and really special. So. Um, I guess the last question I want to just maybe I have two more questions. I'm curious through all this, what has surprised you the most about yourself?
what surprised me the most, I'm a pretty anxious person in general. Um, and I was surprisingly calm through the experience. I was really shocked by that. I think maybe some of it was just like survival instinct kicking in. I feel like the first year I just was so I can both be anxious and negative. And I was I mean, you know this about me. And I I
Sounds like a
I
good
was
dating profile. I'm anxious and negative.
um but I was surprisingly sort of like positive and calm, which I didn't really expect to be my reaction to all of it. I feel like the first
Yeah,
year was like just, getting through it. It was like I got to muster all my strength to make sure I do everything I need to do to get through the situation. And I literally feel like maybe a year out was the first time that I kind of really like the weight of it all hit me. And I
yeah,
kind of broke down and had like a wow, I was just through something huge. Um, I think the adrenaline, the like trying to just get myself through that first year was pretty significant. Um, and but that life lesson of like I can be calm in the face of something really scary. I can be optimistic in the face of something really terrifying. and sort of bleak in moments was a bit of a revelation. And these days, I've really kind of carried that with me. Um, when I get stressed and anxious and negative these days, which obviously still happens quite frequently, I will get that first reaction, and then I remind myself like I have the capacity to get through hard things. I can be calm, and I can trust that I'm going to be okay ultimately.
Yeah.
Um, and that's like really getting bent out of shape about something doesn't help me. So
Yeah.
that like it was a big surprise that that was the way I responded. And it's been I can't say like I feel like a radically different person per se after all of this, but I do feel like there were lessons that I learned just by going through it. Um, I think the other thing that was a bit of a surprise too was I was a like a very like in terms of my worrying a lot about the future, about scenarios that will never come to be. I have a very vivid imagination about a lot of horrifying things that could transpire in life. Um, and part of how I got through actually prepping for that big surgery, I think I had about a month between when it was decided and scheduled. And I would wake up terrified thinking about it. And one day I had a click in my mind where I was like, I'm not having that surgery today. I can enjoy today, and I could be worried about that surgery the day of the surgery. And I've used that as a tool so many times when I wake up and I feel anxious about something and I say, what's going on right now and today? Is there anything I really have to be worried about? And if the answer is no, I say to myself, let's enjoy this day, and if anything comes up, deal with it when it comes up. And I used to be, you know, distraught about things that never ever came to pass in the
Yeah.
future. Um, I forget what question you asked. I just went on a long
That's okay.
rant, but
No, it's great how you surprised yourself. Well,
okay.
here's my last question. We're at the end of this journey. And when we started, you said you wanted to start this video series as a place to connect with other cancer survivors, open a discussion about long-term cancer survivorship. So, reflecting on what has just come out in this past 20 minutes, what final words or final reflections, requests, invitations do you want to share with people who are watching this?
Hmm. I think the primary thing I would really want people to understand is that, a little bit repeating what I've said so far, but that well after people are out of the woods, this ripples for a long time. It might not be a daily thing that people are navigating, but there are days where it can feel just as acute as when you first were diagnosed or first found out. Um, and that at any point, somebody in your life who's had cancer might be in one of those days, even though you don't know that it's going on. So it's good to check in periodically and not overdo it, like we were talking about earlier. Um, it's good to know that your family members, even if they look fine, are still navigating this, almost in the background. It's sort of like when you have all the windows on the computer open, the one that you're not looking at, there's still stuff going on back there. It's always kind of in the background somewhere operating, and it can quickly become the front page in a moment. And I think it's important for people in our lives to be prepared to to show up if we need it in the moment. It might be
Yeah.
once every couple of years, but that would be significant to have that support on that day when you really need it. Um, so I think that would be the biggest thing. And I really would love to see more concrete support and community offerings for long-term survivors. We kind of get forgotten, in the bigger picture, and I just would like to see there be more things that people like, even if a friend or family is not available, to know that there's a group you could call or a community forum you could check into just to say, having a crap day, something went on, and get a little bit of joining and support in that moment.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much, Michael. Even just through talking with you and hearing about your experience and the ways it aligns with my experience, it just helps me feel a little less alone. And I share your hope for ways we can better organize systems and structures to better support cancer survivors. And until then, no, you can always keep me on your list of people to call, and I'll be looking out for you too.
Thanks, Stacy. Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest benefits, I don't even want to say benefits of having cancer is to connect with people like you and to have built a community of people I can connect with that get it, that you don't have to say as much to, and people understand it right away.
Yeah,
Um, and I'm really appreciative of being able to share that with you and know that I have you if I need you, and you know that you have me if you need me.
awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacy.